the first thing I'm going to do, just before we start talking about the agenda, there's just a couple of things that I want to show you so far. The first one, really, that website that we're going to be working on for the better part of today's session, being ITSORealEstate.ca. Just make my way there. So ITSORealEstate.ca, of course, logging in with OMID and password. So one concept that you will notice, and I mean, we've got some stuff in the background here just to remind me a couple things that we're going to talk about, adding a profile picture, things like that, coming up in a few moments. But I do want to tell you about this little bit of a transition screen here. So you will notice there is a dashboard concept. This is when it is the first time that you're logging in for the day. Perhaps if you've timed out of your session or like you were stagnant, notice how the session time is around 2 hours here. If you are just logging in or refreshing the session, you may see this transition dashboard. Okay, it's still being reworked. ITSO has mentioned that they're adding as many single sign-on options here to make it an easy point of access for your applications. The one that we are looking for today, though, is ITSO Matrix. So just this very first one, left-hand corner of the applications. So we've made our way through there, let that load, and we'll be on the actual landing page for Matrix. So I'll just go to my other tab. I'll close this one up. Just admitting some other members here as well. And I'll zoom in a tiny bit. Maybe that'll be better. I know usually some members are joining on different devices, whether it's an iPad, a phone, or things like that. So I'll try to stay zoomed in. Hopefully everybody can see that pretty well. So just before I get into the details of the agenda, what I wanted to show you right after making my way to ITSO Real Estate here is just the easiest way that you can access, first off, the recordings for these types of sessions. Okay, so usually one of the first questions that comes up, as you can see, this session is being recorded. I want to make sure that you can access that. Okay, so if you're looking to get to that recording for a later date, if you're watching any of the previous sessions during your own kind of time there as well, how you're going to access it is through the members area. There's a video training bank on the Oakville Milton District Real Estate Board website. Quickest way to get there, though, is through external links. So we're going to talk more about widgets in a moment. Notice that they are all, you can manipulate them, right? This main screen is something that you can change around. You can close things out. You can drag around these different widgets, the ones that are going to be efficient for you. You put them on the screen where you'd like. Where I want to bring you over here is just the members area. So this red link that you have in external links, when I click on that, it takes me to the members area. Okay, if I scroll down, it is a little bit far down this left-hand side, but you have an option called Video Training Bank. When you make this selection, that's where all of the recordings get uploaded. Okay, so you'll notice the OMDREB training webinars where we have a little bit of a rotation. Today being the introduction, this Thursday at 1 p.m. being the intermediate, and next Wednesday, our web forms and Authenticide, for example. So you can always access the recorded sessions along with a whole archive here. I know the words are probably coming through pretty small here, but this is a huge archive of all the different keynote speakers, anyone that puts on a session for us. If they provide us with the recording, we post them here and you can watch them. So you can see all these new ones kind of coming in down the list. Okay, so I'll just close that up. Remember, it was just kind of members area, video training bank, and that's where you access the recordings. We'll actually make our way to the members area a little bit later on for one of our concepts as well, because we've got some things to do in this profile option. But I'll close that for now. So as far as the agenda for today, let's break that down. So there's two main concepts that we're going to be talking about. Okay, the very first one, or like, let's call it even the first half or 45 minutes or so of today's session, is going to be around all the different settings and profile information that you are going to want to make some changes to just before you start kind of firing off listings and sending things to clients. Just some settings that we want to tweak and make sure that are there, just because the default maybe isn't the greatest. So you might just make some quick changes, things like you saw on my in the background here. We're going to be adding a profile picture, a little bit of like a headshot type of thing. The main concepts that we're working on there are the header and footer for the portal. We're going to be doing an email signature as well as the profile picture. So those three main components, as well as your contact information. Okay, that's the first half of the session, all around the different settings. As soon as we've concluded with that, that's when we're going to follow up with kind of a concept that is one of the main tools that you'll be using on Matrix, of course, which is searching for listings. Different tools that we use and different strategies that we might kind of choose to take when we go to approach searching for listings. Okay, so that whole second half is all about that, setting up a really, really good foundation for the search. First half is your profile information, and second half is searches. So let's jump right into it. As far as the general layout, right, we know that our landing page on ITSORealEstate.ca, which is our matrix system, it is made up of a whole bunch of different widgets. So you saw me a little bit while I was introducing the external links. I kind of moved things around a little bit. I dragged them to a different spot. So be aware of that. You can also close them out, and you will notice that there are two really specific ones that'll be left if you ever do that. So if I close all of these widgets out, what happens is, there's one more I've got to close. You end up with this pretty basic front screen. Okay, news and alerts is one that is always going to be there, top left. I can't move this one. It's kind of just pasted there, like a sticky note type of thing. Okay, it's where your brokerage as well as the board may reach out to you and send you any kind of notification. Okay, I know sometimes they could be a little bit annoying, but as long as you have a look at them, you can do the "I've read this," and then they'll stop kind of popping up there. They can be overwhelming though if you haven't logged in for a little while though, and you might get a few of them at a time. On the other side here, we have the additional widget. Okay, so if you close out any of the other ones, that's where they end up getting stored, and you can just kind of drag them out of here, the ones that you intend to use. So for example, if I wanted to pull out things like hot sheet or search, let's see, I'm not sure if there's going to be, well, we talked about external links, so I'll bring that one out as well. Okay, so maybe something like this, even just like a couple of widgets that we might end up talking about, maybe I'll just pull those out for now. Okay, so we have pretty much just like 3 working widgets here that we have on our front screen. The rest are all kind of tucked away. General kind of menu options, the most commonly used things, probably your My Matrix dropdown, as well as the search dropdown. So we're definitely going to be spending a bit of time talking about some of the other options across here. Okay, and notice that you do also have a menu here. If you click on this hello and where it says your name, you do have a spot where there might be some other options, such as a settings button, a bit of a logout section. So just to bear in mind. Okay, when it comes to the different spots where we're going to be making changes to our profile information. Okay, there's a couple different places where that happens. The first spot we're going to go is inside of our settings. So you saw it in this dropdown. I can either go hello Eric and click on settings. There is one that they added to this menu as well. So just notice it is in both spots. If I click on this settings option, whether I do it over here on the right or through this dropdown, it will take me to the exact same place. And it opens up this settings menu on Matrix. Okay, the spot that we are going to be talking about today, like notice there's a couple different icons and some different settings that you'll eventually work in. For today, we're going to be focusing on the My Information. So if I click on this option, it brings me first off to an information section. This is the public information that ends up sharing through. So if I search for myself, maybe as a roster search, or if a different colleague or salesperson was looking for me in Matrix, this is the information that they would be seeing, right? Things like the brokerage phone number, whatever I've chosen to put in here. The thing to understand, however, is this information distributes from a very specific place. Okay, this information comes from the Oakville board website in that members area that we saw earlier where that video training bank is. Okay, so we're going to be following up on this to look at the changes that are possible. We're going to talk about this header and footer in the portal as well as the email signature. Okay, and then we will actually go in this add edit in the input where I'll show you a third way to make some tweaks to your profile information where we're going to add the profile picture. Okay, so let's start with this main screen, however. Where do we make changes to this? If I want to update my email address or I want to add a cell phone number, Where exactly do I do that? Okay, so as I said, it's in your members area on the board website. So let's go there first. Okay, I just clicked on this Oakville Milton District Real Estate Board logo to take me back to the home page. Since we've already kind of set out that in the external links, we have the members area. So if I click on that option, let this load, the spot that we want is my profile. Okay, and when you click on that, it gives you a bit of a form that you could work through, things to fill out. Okay, the profile picture we'll be talking about in a few steps. I told you that was kind of the third one that we're going to do. And whatever changes you make, you have a save button towards the bottom. Okay, a couple important ones here. So from this top kind of right-hand side under contact info, I'm not sure if I could zoom in too much or else this screen kind of changes a bit, but there, I'll zoom in once. You can see the primary phone. Okay, and pretty important one here, if you are interested in this information being available, is this mobile number option. Okay, so if you were to punch something in, I guess I'll just kind of put a random number in there. But the thing to understand with mobile number is it is a little bit of a two-parter, and I do get this question quite a bit. If you update your phone number in here, just be sure as well, if you want it to be public, make sure that you toggle this little NY for yes or no on whether it's going to show on Realtor.ca. Okay, so if you add this one in, just make sure you switch this to a yes. Okay, and then the same type of stuff, right? Anything here that you see that you have access to make a change to, such as if I was going to update my primary email or change any kind of the settings, okay, you absolutely have access to that. The only time you might have to reach out to our membership department is just if it's, you know, a brokerage change, a change to brokerage address, or like a legal name change or something like that. The rest of them, generally you have access to, right? If your phone number or your email ever changes, just hop in, make the switch, and hit the save option at the bottom. Okay, so that's the very first one. So again, make sure you understand this form here, though, in the members area, this is the distribution that goes to all the public channels. So the information here makes its way to Matrix. It comes from here and goes to Realtor.ca. This is the spot where you have to change your profile information if you have to update something. Okay, so I'll close that up. So the very next one, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the portal header and the email signature. So for this part, I'm just going to pull up just kind of like a random listing here really quickly. So out of all things, maybe if you don't follow along on this one, I'm just going to click and choose a random listing, not one that I put too much thought into. Looks like we actually ended up in London for this example even. But all I want to do is show you a preview of what your client would receive if you never updated your portal header or anything like that. So I'm just going to click on email. I'm going to click on preview here, right? We can see that the email signature itself is a little bit bland. It just says my name, for example. So something we'll be wanting to work on. And when I click on preview here, this gives me an idea of what the portal would look like. Okay, so the portal itself is a very, very important concept to get our minds around. When we're sharing a listing with a client, right, we're not sending them a PDF. We're not sending them like a piece of paper that just has listing information on it and images and stuff like that. When we email a listing to a client, we are in fact sending them a pretty intricate tool called the client portal. Okay, you're seeing an example of one right here, right? I'm on this first page. I have, from the client's perspective, I've got an interactive map feature. There's a bit of a summary and description of a property. There's information, perhaps my agent's information, a little bit of a kind of a dark rectangle towards the top that maybe we can do a little bit better on. Okay, and then you make your way through, and as a client, it continues. You have more intricate features and different interactive things that you have access to, which include the listing information. Okay, so this is an example of a client portal, what your client would be looking at if you were to share a listing with them. Okay, let me just close this up here. And let's have a look at how we can make that look a little bit more professional. Okay, so I'm just going to hover my matrix, go back to that settings option that we were previously in, click on my information. Okay, and start working on a couple of these. So really the header and footer, which is that top part of the portal, as well as the email signature. So if we were to, maybe I'll just do the email signature first here. Just click on that. Notice that as a default, it was pretty blank, right? You have some tools here where you can kind of create and bring in how you would like your signature to look. If you have it created elsewhere though, I find it a lot easier, instead of working with these tools, I do find it a lot easier to just kind of copy it in. So let me just open up Outlook here. Just gonna pop open, maybe kind of, I'll click on new email just so I can have what normally happens in my signature, for example. So I just opened up kind of as if I was typing up an email. I do happen to have kind of a signature that I've set out, right? I find that this is one of kind of the easier ways to kind of make that happen. So if I was to do this and copy over this portion, right, maybe as you're following along, if you happen to be more, on a phone right now or on an iPad, maybe it is something that you just kind of jot down a little bit of note and do this a bit later on. It is a lot easier to do on a computer, of course, right? If I was perhaps to put a couple of tabs side to side, if that's your preference kind of thing, but you just kind of copy the one that you have, bring it over, it'll come in with the images and everything. So I find that is the easiest way rather than kind of trying to work with the tools that are here. But either way, you can choose your preference there. Okay. As soon as you make the switch and you've changed this up to your liking, same as before, just hit the save towards the bottom. It'll update and kind of keep that information. Okay. Yeah, exactly. I did get a message in the chat that, yeah, working with these tools, sometimes the formatting down below, it gets a little bit messy and a little bit lost. Yeah, these tools seem to be kind of maybe a little bit outdated. I find it much easier to kind of copy something in, something that you've already created. Maybe you have an Outlook, a Gmail, or something that has a much better format. You can just drag it in all at once through copy paste. Moving over to the header and footer section. So remembering, this is that part that was at the top of the portal. Well, what happens in your client portal is it's a private conversation between yourself and your client. So this might be a really good opportunity for you to bring in your own branding, right? You can make that look however you would want. You could bring in your own custom image to go towards the top, and you could share through your contact information to them so that they have it kind of right there. Okay, I'll show you a couple ways that we're going to make changes there. By default, though, if you've never made changes to this, perhaps yours is just showing up as this kind of white with the big dark rectangle top of the screen, as we saw earlier. In order to choose your own image, though, you do have to get just over to the next screen. How you do that is by making any selection. So these are just the standardized ones that are available. If I just choose any of them and then click preview, it'll put me on the screen where I can upload my own custom image. So if that's the spot you're looking for, pardon me, it's just right here after you click on preview. So I went away from that top option. Previously it said I choose not to use a header and footer at this time. We just moved over, hit the preview option, we're on the next screen, and we could see that one of our options now is upload a custom banner image. If I click on this option, it gives me a little bit more of a breakdown before I browse in the photo. So it'll tell me that I do have a suggested image size for this space, 1600 by 120 pixels. So of course, if you're working with kind of like a media specialist, or if you do your own kind of photography or anything like that, or whatever you do for your graphics editing, I'm drawing blanks here, you do know that the size here that you're looking to work with, or that you could provide to the individual that creates that for you. And it would pretty much be like this really long section, 1600 pixels by 120 being the recommended. Okay, you pretty much just browse your computer, bring in that file, and it'll give you the preview. Like as soon as you browse it in, you'll see the preview. Okay, what I'm gonna do though is, since I don't have a perfect 1600 by 120 pixel type of rectangle to put in that space, I'm just going to click select a different banner image in my case, and I will choose one of the standardized ones. So you have a long list of all the options here. If I was to scroll down, maybe I'll choose one that I'm familiar with here, something like the couch and the little tree. Click the preview option, And just like that, if I had a 1600 by 120 that had my own branding perhaps, well, it would just kind of fit into this space for the header. Okay. See as well that just like before, it was just my name showing up in the left-hand side. An inquiry that I get on the phone pretty often here is just, hey, how do I get more info? I want to share my cell phone number. I want to share my perhaps my email or any kind of other information here. It's a little bit obscure, but it's actually this branding section here. So what happens is it lets you choose from those fields that you entered on my profile on the Oakville board website that's shared through, and they end up right here in the form of these 5 drop-down menus. Okay, if I was to select something such as the office phone number, or whatever the case may be, right? Maybe email, office phone number. As I make the selections here under branding, you see them kind of pop up. Gives you the preview of the portal header here. Okay, you can have up to 5. So even if I was to do like the business address or something like that, right? You can choose whatever your preference is, however you want that broken down. And as long as you go through to the members area and put in your mobile number, you'll be able to select it here as well. Okay. Once you're finished with that, right, you can scroll down and have a look. You'll notice there is a print header as well. So the example of what it would look like if I printed a listing and sent it to my actual printer instead of emailing it to a client. Okay, maybe you're happy with how that is, and you can just hit the save option. Now we have a little bit, even though I don't have my own custom one, that's my own branding, if that was my goal, well, even putting this in the meantime is going to look a whole lot better than what was there before. Okay, so we've done the email signature, save the information there. We've done our header and footer. Okay, we've looked at what it looks like on when we're in the members area and we're updating the distribution form on my profile. Okay, the only thing left is this profile picture and where that comes from. Okay, so let's have a look at that now. So the spot where this is, it is very obscure and it is quite tucked away. Okay, but the spot where it's hiding is in this add edit section. Okay, so if I hover add edit, I can either just click right on the title or I can click on input. This is the section that you go to when you are putting a listing up on the MLS system. So a bit of more of a topic that we cover in the intermediate session. About half of the session this Thursday, we do spend it inside of that input function, putting up a listing and making it live on the MLS system. There is also one spot where your settings are here. So notice this top portion. This is where we actually input a new listing, for example. The spot that we want, though, for our profile picture is right here. It asks us for a member ID. So if you put in your own OMID, in my case, it's 21657, and when you click on edit, there's a modify member screen. And this is the spot where you can add in your own profile picture. So if you have like a professional photo that you want to bring in, that you want to kind of come through and when you're sharing information, you want a little bit of kind of an image there, it's right down here where you see manage photos. Okay, when you click on this option, okay, you'll notice it is a bit of like a browse on your computer. It also provides you, just like before, when we were looking at the header, it gave us the recommended file size. So we can see here that in this case, it's 724 by 1086 is the recommended photo size. I did not have an exact one, but I still wanted to bring in an option. So it was just that one that you saw on my desktop here. So we have the profile picture. I kind of just cropped a random photo there so we had something, and when I hit browse, right, it lets me kind of choose the option and you see it there. Okay, even though I did not have one of the recommended file size, it will still accept it and I kind of allow you to use it there. But if you are working with somebody that's kind of like a professional and making that graphic design, maybe maybe you do go for the exact kind of recommended size for the photo. Okay, browse it in. Certify and save is the option that pops up when you bring one in. You'll see that it updated and you can kind of make your way out after that. Okay, so just because that one is kind of tucked away in a bit of an obscure spot, I'll just show that path one more time. So we go to add edit, type in our OMID in the Realtor section, hit edit, and then manage photos. And this is where you have your profile picture. So from here, how you saw when we were in my members area, you saw the photo that was showing up. Well, it was showing up because of this section here. Okay, so just remembering out of those different settings and the spots where we went so far, there's really 3 spots that we worked on. Okay, one of them being the members area on the Oakville board website, members.omdreb.on.ca, members area, my profile is the main distribution form. Okay, the second way is either hovering my matrix and clicking on settings, or clicking on the name where you're logged in and clicking on settings. It takes you to the main settings page for matrix, where you can go into the my information section. You'll see the information coming from the board website, your header and footer, your email signature, and the very last one that we talked about was the add edit input, typing in your OMID over here and doing the manage photo if you're looking for a profile picture. Okay. And really, really good question there. I did get a question about that one. It takes a little bit of time whenever you make a change, whether it is on the members area or if it's inside of that add edit, it takes time for that cache memory to update. So I did have a question. How long does it take for the profile picture to show up on the members area? Well, I've seen it sometimes as quick as like 10 minutes, but I've also seen times where it's been like 45 minutes or so. Okay, so I don't know the exact timing for how that cache memory goes to all the different distribution areas, but it can take a little bit of time. Usually I haven't seen it just be like instantaneous or anything like that, but just do expect that you can kind of pop in an hour later type of thing, have a look and just double check that it came through properly. But really, really good question there. You will see same thing. If I go into the members area and I click on my profile, I type in my mobile number in here, switch this to the letter Y, and then I hit save. It won't go to realtor.ca immediately. It might be like kind of that same thing, half hour, 45 minutes, and then I'll see it go through properly as soon as it updates to all the distribution channels. Perfect. The very, very last thing I want to show you here was just a little bit of a preview, right? We made changes to our header and footer. We made changes to our email signature. Same thing that I did before. I just want to pull up a really quick preview here. I think my internet might be running a little bit slow. I probably shouldn't have attacked it with this crazy search. Maybe I'll switch it to Halton. I very much confused it. I'm going to give it one more try here. Perfect. All right, there we go. So I just wanted to pull up a random listing. Maybe it even ends up, nope. I thought it was going to be the same one that we had before. I guess this one's in Halliburton. Just going to click on email so we can see the preview. So we're emailing one listing just like before. Now we have that signature coming through. If you remember that we changed in the profile settings, in my information under email signature. And if I click on preview here for the client portal that we talked about, the top should look quite different. So you do see that update. It should update straight away. There's no like time lag and cache memory, anything on that one. But if you remember at the start, right, the default was just my name with a white square and then this big dark rectangle. So now that if I start sharing information with my clients, right, looks a whole lot better that there's some branding here they can access. They know the email, the phone number, as well. The image is probably even leaps and bounds better than kind of the default that comes through. So some really, really quick settings that you can make some changes to. Important to get those though, just before you start kind of emailing things and sharing information. All right, looks like I've got, since the last time we've been to the main page, there's been a communication. I might actually have to click I've read this and deal with it later, because if I do the read later, we're gonna hit it like 6 different times in this session every time I come to the main page. So I'll re-look at that one as soon as I have a moment. All right, so as far as settings, making changes to all that type of stuff, those 3 main sections that I've directed you to, that would be where you're making those types of changes. You know what, now that I think of it, maybe there is one more that I want to show you really, really quickly before we transition into the search functions. And that's just because right now, one of the most kind of common inquiries I got today, being that we're coming really close to the end of the first quarter and into the second quarter type of thing. I've probably spoken to like 5 different individuals today on the phone about how to update their credit card details and automatic billing settings and things like that. So I'll show you that really, really quick. It's going to be the exact same thing that we did to get to the board website though. It's something that you manage in your members area. So notice how this one is members area and dues payment in red. When you click on this option, it's also from this left-hand menu. There's an option, looks like it's probably like the 10th one or so, called automatic billing settings. If for any reason you just want to update the card, kind of if your card's changed or if your old one's expired and it's just time to update it, this is the spot where you do that. So you just click on automatic billing settings. You'll notice I don't have one on mine, just being board association staff. But if you were to add one in, right, it'll tell you whether you have auto renewal active or not. It'll say whether it's on or off. And when you go to add a new credit card, right, you can just kind of type in that new information and then click the enable auto renewal. Okay, so different settings in different spots here. This one in your members area on the board website is also where you can access things like automatic billing, right, transaction history. I get this inquiry on the phone pretty often as well, just being that it's like tax time if you've gotten around to that just yet. And if you ever want your tax documents or previous payments that you made, it's all in your transaction history as well. Okay, so let's close this up. Awesome. So as far as everything with the settings, let's wrap it up there. Let's absolutely transition into that second main topic for today's session, where we're pretty much just going to be jumping into searching for listings. Okay, so there's a lot of different concepts that we're going to kind of talk about here. When it comes to searching, however, you will notice that there are a few different features that you can use for searching. Okay, the first thing to realize is the different ones that you have access to, you might be using that tool for a very different reason. Okay, I've got a search widget right on the front screen, for example. Right, I've got a shorthand kind of speed bar here towards the center of the screen. As well, I've got an entire drop-down list dedicated to the search function as well. So quite a few different search functionalities. We're going to break down kind of when is the best time to make use of those. Right, we even have another one here in the roster search where I can search for other salespeople, colleagues, that type of thing. Okay, the first one that I'll talk about really, really quickly here is the actual search widget that you have. And the very best time, or the main time that I'll be using this search widget, is when I know something really specific about a property that I'm trying to find. Right? Contrary to maybe running a residential search where I'm going to be using a criteria screen and kind of honing in on a range of different listings, well, when I know exactly the property I'm looking for, the spot that I'm going to use is most likely this search widget. Perhaps I know the MLS number and I could just pop it in and hit search. Maybe I just know the actual address. So in this case, very typically I'd be popping in something like the street number, street name into this widget, hitting search, and it will actually pull up more of a history of that specific property. Okay, so if I was to choose one, I'll choose like a pretty unique one here. This is just one in more the St. Catharines or Thorold area. I've got 55 Burness. Okay, one thing to note, whenever you're running a search and you're typing something in on Matrix, it is not case sensitive. Okay, if I was to do this, all capital letters, it will give me the exact same results as all lowercase. So this capitalization on this first letter is not going to make a change. But we'll just start with this one, 55 Burness, hit search, and let's have a look at the results that it gives us. So it looks like I've come up with 6 results. We're able to see, pardon me, a range of them that actually sold. So this is kind of the actual closed status here, or status. Sorry, we've got times when it's sold at $215,000, another time that it actually sold 363, and some other ones under the status that are perhaps expired, right? We're going to see different historical things, like whether it was closed status, expired, maybe some other ones that we search, we'll see if it was canceled, or maybe even run into one that's active, right? So we'll get familiar with those, of course. Was to click on one of these, for example, you can maybe find out more information about it. Right? When did this happen? Well, it looks like it was sometime in 2018. The actual close date was April 23rd in 2018. Okay. Okay, so I did get a question in the chat really quick with regards to the price as well. Current price is the sold, or was it the listed price? Well, we might be able to determine that by having a look at this kind of actual listing screen now. So we've got the sold price is 363, the list price was 365. So I'm just going to click on this member single line display. That's my navigation to get back to that table of kind of rows and columns that we were on. So this option here, member single line display, it looks like current price in our case was the sold price historically coming through. Okay, but we will double back on that. So it is a really, really good question, but just as we get more into the searches and we get to these results screen in a little bit more detail, we're actually going to be breaking down how you can make changes and customize this screen. It's called customizing listing displays, and it is important that you do that, right? I might bring in something called list price, sold price, current price. There might be a whole bunch of different ones that I bring in on purpose, because this one with current price is just a default, and it might not be the best description for the things we're looking for. So great question, but we'll jump into that shortly once we get into a more detailed results screen options. Okay, right? Like noticing that you can absolutely customize and move all this stuff around. You can make it look however you want. It's all up to you. And the default, I'll be honest, is not very good. The default is almost useless. You have to make changes to it. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that in a few moments. So we did end up with our 6 listings here, for example. I'm just going to go back to the main screen and we could try some other ones just to get familiar with it. So that was 55 Burness. Right? What if I was to do something a little bit different, right? I told you at the start that that one was kind of unique, right? There might not be a Burness in every single city, but something a little bit different, like 100 King Street. Well, I might want to bring in some extra information, like Hamilton or whatever the case, or if I'm looking for something really specific, I might throw it in at that point. And that's because of one concept that we absolutely are going to be tackling once we get into the more of the map function, is just understanding that ITSORealEstate.ca, this matrix system that we're using, we have access to listing information right now from 21 boards and associations. When I run a search, right, my main trading area might be Oakville. However, when I run a search, I have to understand that I'm looking at a massive geography, right? I'm looking at a huge portion of Ontario that make up those 21 boards and associations. So sometimes you do have to keep that in mind on your strategy and your approach to your searches. If I just put in 100 King, well, last time we only had 6 results for Burness. We've got 110 here, and you'll notice under city, I've got Harrison, Guelph, Lindsay, right? There might even be some cities and areas that I've probably never even heard of before. Apparently there's a listing here for 100 King Road. That was in Wabashine, right? A lot of different areas, let's call it. I can't even pronounce half of these. Okay, so bear in mind how much data you are looking at when you run a search on this matrix system. Okay. Just another thing to note as well, if you are running this type of search, you do only include the first word. What is Park Lawn Road? That's the one I'm coming up with. I was trying to come up with one. I don't know if there's going to be like a random street number 15, but if you have something like Park Lawn Road, just show you, I wouldn't run it in this way. Whenever you're running a search, you only put one value in each field. So see how this says Park Lawn? it won't accept it with park lawn. I would actually just omit that lawn and put park. Okay, I wonder if this even exists. Okay, it looks like there are some 15 park roads. Okay, and we'd be able to kind of, it looks like park lawn is not even a thing, but park was a word that we can use, which is great. So just notice that, right? I wouldn't put two separate words. If it was park lawn, I would just put that very first one. And you'll see that as we start to bring in some extra concepts as well. Okay, but when you know the address or you know something really specific about the property, remember one of the best spots is definitely in this search widget. If you're ever looking up your own family home, or you're very curious looking into something, this is the spot when you know the address. Okay, if someone provides you an address, you're not going to go into a residential search and look at a criteria screen. It's going to be a lot more complicated than just typing in the street number, street name, and running the search, for example. Okay. Awesome. So I did get a question as well about kind of TREB, and can we see the listing if it's posted on TREB and not on here? Can we still see it? That kind of thing. So because that's actually a really, really complex question to answer. So when we get to the map and we're talking more about the geography in our area, I'll be sure to tackle things that have to do with TREB as well, so you have that. Okay. But in short, it's a yes and a no for specific reasons. So we will discuss that in more detail for sure. Okay. So the next part that I want to show you is, as you saw, right, we were manipulating the different way that we typed things when we ran our searches. How we're going to approach that now is by bringing in a really important concept that might be something that you apply to some of your strategies for your searches, and that is the idea of the wildcard feature. Okay, a wildcard allows you to open up the search. Okay, we're going to do it in the roster search, actually. I feel like that's probably the best place to introduce it. So I'm just going to hover this. I'm going to click on member search. So now we're searching for other agents, perhaps, or other members of other boards, rather than actual listings. So you have a member search. If you were trying to track down my contact information, for example, right? Perhaps you remembered from like the previous slide that maybe you know my first name is Eric, but you don't remember how to spell my last name, for example. Just use this one because it is a little bit different. Last name, so last name Garand. And what I've done is I put in the first 4 letters of my last name, but I put an asterisk here, which is your wildcard feature. Might be a little bit tough to see this pop-up that came up as I'm highlighting this and I'm working inside of this field. Apologies there. I'll read what's on there. It's even small for me, but it does say that if the full name is not known or the spelling is unclear, use the asterisk as a wildcard to replace the missing information. So that's exactly what it does. We're telling the system, well, the start of this last name must be G-A-R-A in that exact order. However, anything can come following that. And it actually ended up with 6 matches. I didn't even put in a first name. All I did was this, G-A-R-A with the asterisk, and we look at the results. We'll see what it's come up with. Okay, so we have someone whose last name is Garad, Garami, we have Garand, Garang, Garasto, and Garay, right? So we could see how the asterisks worked in. We can see that capitalization did not matter at all whatsoever. Okay, and if you were trying to track it down through those 6 results, you'd be able to find which one refers to me pretty quickly here. You would see my OMID. If you ever were perhaps reporting a sale and putting my name in as, well, not that you would, but if you were searching for me and you were putting me as a cooperating agent perhaps, well, you'd have my OMID. You could pull in that information. So in here we could see it's all that information that's sharing from those different profiles we looked at. This information here is coming from that Oakville board website in the members area. The photo itself is coming from the add edit in the realtor section. But you'd be able to track some things down, right? I know right now we're just using my name as an example, but if you were looking for an actual cooperating agent that you're trying to report a sale for and use their name, well, perhaps you are going to do a roster search. Because the thing is, right, if I do it any other way, and I try, oops, just noticing that the thing is, Matrix is very, very rigid, right? It's going to give you the results that you have to spell things pretty much spot on. And that might not be the easiest thing to do all the time, especially with names. Even some streets can be kind of tough to spell, cities, things like that. So just bear in mind, we're going to talk more about this asterisk feature. It just really opens up the search, right? If you search something on Google, it'll say, hey, did you mean Garand? It'll kind of help you along the way. Matrix is very rigid. It will not give you that leeway. You have to spell it exactly. Okay. So let's go ahead, and where we're going to go now is we're going to talk a little bit about the actual bread and butter of where we run most of the searches. Okay, we are going to run an actual residential search. We'll talk about the criteria screen, and we'll look a little bit further into the wildcard once we've introduced that screen. So if I go search residential, all these different search drop-downs give you the options that you have. I'm going to go with residential just for the sake of today's session, just because all these different criteria screens are going to look really, really similar. But we'll just go residential to keep it simple. You'll notice that you're in a residential search because it'll give you that title up towards the top. Keeping our attention towards kind of this portion of the screen as well, right? We have 3 main screens that we're going to be working in between as we get to the results or get to the actual listings that we're looking for. Okay, we have our criteria screen, we have a map tab, and we also have a results tab. So you are undoubtedly going to see me work from one to the other until we come up with the exact results we're looking for. Okay, you'll notice the amount of matches that you have towards the bottom here. When it is the open system and it's perhaps those 21 boards and associations, sometimes perhaps even more than that, depending on the different agreements, listing shared agreements in place and stuff like that, right? You see a huge amount of matches. Your goal here in looking at this criteria screen is kind of breaking down some of the things that the listing agent may have put on that listing to help you find those ones that you're looking for. Okay, so we'll do a really, really quick breakdown of these different sections. So on this left-hand side, if we look just at this portion, we'll see things with regards to the type of status the listing may have, more specifically the property subtype, things like common interest, right? Starting to get into more specific features, architectural styles and stuff like that. Okay, so that's really our main spot on the left. In the center of the screen, where we have these dividers, it's more about the location. Okay, so we've got an option here where we could work in a little bit more of a map function. Perhaps we can type in a little bit that has to do with the address if we wanted to. Then we have a bit of a breakdown from municipality, region, neighborhood, as well as city. Okay, so if I was looking for something in our area, right, perhaps I'm typing in something like Halton. I can see this portion update. Now it's going to give me the option for Oakville. And then I go into the neighborhood and break it down further, perhaps. Okay, I'll just erase that here. But we've got things about the location. If we scroll down, we'll see a tab with regards to if we're breaking down things to do with the waterfront, different optional pieces here, as well as a section that we are going to talk about in more detail, the public remarks section. This is where we're going to be practicing our asterisk feature and our wildcard in a moment. Okay, so notice public remarks is towards the bottom in the center space. And then we have some much more specific functions. Things like the listing price, how many rooms, right? Parking features, garage space, stuff like that, okay? Actual square footage perhaps, or total area, things like that. Okay, so more generalized statuses and property types, everything to do with location, and then much more specific property features towards the right. Okay, get familiar with this screen. Okay, when you are inputting a listing even, right, it's the input screen is meant to look very much like an info data sheet. So sometimes when you're looking for a certain set of listings, at the end of the day, you might be trying to get into minds of kind of the listing agent and what type of stuff they might have put on that listing, because that's what you're using to generalize them and to track down the exact results you're looking for. Okay, so bear that in mind. Where we're going to head, though, as I said, we're going to talk about the public remarks, center of the screen towards the bottom, just because we were talking about the wildcard feature a second ago. So I'll show you one of the approaches that I might bring into place, right? Haven't done anything, haven't made changes or changed the statuses or anything, just went with the default. But we're going to go in the public remarks and we'll talk about a little bit of a concept here. Just noticed there's something down here as well, so I might just delete it before we start working on this. But you do also have an additional fields section. Looks like I've got one called number of kitchens. I'm sure someone was talking to me about kitchen in the basement or something like that, maybe earlier in the week, and I just kind of forgot that it was there. But yes, you can add or remove some customized fields if you're looking for an additional one as well. Okay, so if I hit add remove, I get rid of this number of kitchens one. Right, all you end up doing is looking for the one you want or searching for it and then adding it to the right. I'm just going to go back. If I scroll down here, perfect. Number of kitchens is gone. Okay, so you might work with that. Click on this add button. The only thing that I would mention is be careful the one that you add in. Make it maybe just one of your approaches for the search. I wouldn't just rely on an additional field every time. It might just be one of my searches that I run to find specific properties. And the reason for that is not everything in the additional fields might be mandatory, right? When that listing agent puts the property up, typically you want to stick with the more mandatory fields that they had to make a selection on, right? Just be careful which ones you select. But we're going to the remarks here, and let's talk about this wildcard a little bit further. Okay, so just like I said, right, additional fields might be one strategy. Public remarks might be a totally different strategy that we use. Time that this might come up is, right, when we're looking for something that perhaps doesn't have a specific field. What I mean by that is something like, especially in the Oakville or Halton area, things we're seeing pretty often coming up is the idea of the in-law suites. Okay, nanny suites, in-law suites, things like that are kind of popping up more and more. I really like showing this section with that function because, I mean, when you're searching for listings, there isn't just a box that you're going to click where here we have basement, yes or no, right? There isn't like a yes or no for in-law suite. So we're going to use the public remarks instead. Okay. If I was to type something in, however, right, if I go with in-law, see what we end up with. Very quickly, when you type something in this field, you'll get to 0 matches. So why is that? Okay, and what'll happen is picture the way that the public remarks are written, right? It's a huge paragraph. Sometimes it's like 1,000 characters or however many characters the listing agent used to fill that space. Well, that's where your asterisk comes in. You have to account for that. Just like how when you did my name, it was G-A-R-A with the asterisk, we had to account for the rest of the name. Okay, if it was spacious in-law suite, above, I don't know why I'm even above garage area, I don't know. Okay, let's just say that that ended up being the sentence within the public remarks that the agent used, right? Well, this whole section stemming on this right-hand side would become an asterisk. Everything on the left would become an asterisk. Then we would actually get results. Okay, wildcard feature on either end of the word, the keyword that we're looking for. And now we have 441 matches that have this exact word somewhere inside of the public remarks. So it might help me find something really specific. But the thing with this section, right, you do have to be a little bit creative. You might have to think outside the box a little bit. Okay, so I'll remember that number as best I can. We got 441. The very next thing that we might do is just account for some other spelling, right? What if the listing agent didn't know that it had a hyphen? Maybe they put a space. Let's have a look here. And we have 81 matches actually where maybe this isn't on purpose, but there was a bit of a spelling error. So we have in-law with a space. What if we didn't have a space? we'd have 57. Okay, and what you may end up doing is combining those, much like when you're combining email addresses and that type of thing. In this case, you combine with comma space. So if I was to type those out, in-law, comma space, okay, a couple different variations perhaps. Okay, well, now I've put them all together and I've ended up with 565 matches. Right, maybe I'll even bring in like an extra word, see if I could get, oh, looks like it only gave us another 33 or so listings, but even nanny kind of worked in there as well. Okay, so we have in-law, comma space, in-law, in-law with this space here, and then nanny or nanny suite, or however you wanted to kind of bring it in. Well, now we've broadened our search quite a bit. Instead of the 441 that we had before, right? Adding in a little bit of extra to account for how a listing agent might have written it. We've ended up with quite a few extra ones, right? Like 147 extra ones in our results. Okay, so as far as different things that you could do, right? I might not have like a checkbox or something that I could use in my criteria screen when I'm looking for, maybe it's go stations or kind of transit nearby or whatever the case may be. And one of my strategies to help a client find a property may have to do with this or incorporating that feature. So just bear in mind how effective it can be. And also at all times, right, you're gonna keep an eye on this section, right, might have to think outside the box a bit when you work it in. But I've heard a lot of different kind of creative ways that agents or members have looked for listings in the past, and this remarks section might be one of them. Okay, now we've got 588. We would go to our results, we'd have a look, perhaps we'd specify our area, get more specific about it, and eventually come down to the exact matches that we are looking for, and we get that property that our client wants. Okay, so just one strategy. If I was to erase that, right, perhaps I'm just gonna back away and kind of go to my main screen to refresh everything. I go back into the residential search. Let's start to talk about actually breaking down those geographies and how do we look at the different areas. Okay, the main spot where we're going to be talking about that, talking about the different boards that are participating and sharing information. Best place I find to do that is on the map itself. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a few different things we're going to talk about when we get to the map. Let's just hop there right now. So I'm not making any changes to this main criteria screen. If I was to just click on map, might have to give it a second. I know 5,000 plus matches, right? It might take a moment for it to load, but start to notice how it's broken down, right? If I scroll different areas, I'll notice that the listings themselves, they get grouped into different regions, into like main pins that might kind of represent a specific area. We can see a very vast geography here as we're looking across. It starts to give us some indication of the boards we're sharing information with, right? The fact that I could see 400 or more listings in London gives me an indication that I probably have access to that one, right? Cambridge, Kitchener, Guelph, things like that. Okay, but how do I know what is the list or what are the 21 boards that we actually share information with? Best way to track that down, it's actually right here. There's a little bit of a drop down called jump to address. This is usually the one that I refer to. If ever I get the question, right, I'll get a phone call. Hey, Eric, is Mississauga sharing information with us? Can I look at listings in Mississauga? I'll say, okay, well, let's have a quick look, right? And where I would go is right here to jump to address. When you click on this drop down, it gives you the list of participating ITSO boards. If I made my way down this list and saw that Mississauga is in here, that would be my confirmation. I can tell this individual, yes, Mississauga is one of the 21 boards, right? And you can go ahead and, I mean, you don't have to make the selection, but it's just it's just good that you can see that list at any time, right? Anytime you make it to this particular map, you can see the list yourself, okay? Might have to refresh it there because I was clicking on too many options while we were talking about that. Let me go back to the map. Okay, but jump to address, right? If I ever wanted to confirm, right, is Barry a participating board? Try and have a look. Looks like it's the last one. I thought that maybe I had missed it. It was towards the top, but you can see your list here, right? I can tell that London and St. Thomas Association, that we have Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Barry, all that type of stuff. So if ever your client asks you this kind of question and you're unsure, just remember, this is a really quick way that you can track down that information. 21 boards are in this list. Okay. As far as some things to understand on this map as well, we're going to work through these different icons, which is the tools that you have access to on the map. I'm a very, very visual person. When I approach searches, I like to use the map, and normally I'll do like a certain tool or drawing on the map for most of the kind of the strategies that I use to find listings. Okay, and it all has to do with how the listings are pinned, right? You could see them kind of grouping into different areas here. As you zoom in, those grouped pins get more specific, where each individual green pin or kind of different one that you see here is a different listing or different property. Okay. If I was to draw over a section, that would end up being the only spot where the listings can exist. So something you might see me doing pretty often is when I get into this map and there's 5,000 or more, I might just draw something over the water to get my listings down to 0 so that I can actually move around and see what this geography looks like. Right? Sometimes I'll just do that to get the listings out of there, because now you'll notice I drew something on the map and the only spot where the listings can go is where you draw. Okay, now that I got rid of that drawing, we're back to all of those 5,000 plus pins for the whole area. Okay. So we're going to work through and talk about these different drawing options. Something important to get familiar with. Just so we get rid of the pins, I'm actually going to choose something like this draw rectangle, and I'll leave a shape out in the water here so it gets rid of our listings. But we do want to work through these different drawing tools. So INRIX Drive Time we'll probably talk about last. This is an interactive tool. It's very similar to kind of your drawing tools that you have, but we'll talk about that one in a minute. It brings in driving patterns in Google Analytics to come up with the drawing. So we'll do that one last. But you definitely want to get used to and familiar with the different drawing tools that you have. Okay, so drawing different shapes, polygons and things like that, right? I might do a couple of intricate neighborhoods by bringing in whatever the case may be, maybe a freehand drawing of specifically these kind of sections here, right? Whatever the case may be, but do get familiar with them. Depending on the device you're using, it might be a little bit different exactly how you kind of make the selection and choose something. So just get familiar with these drawing tools. The main ones are this radius, rectangle, polygon, and freehand polygon. With your drawings as well, notice each of them have this like little red dot. That gives you access to some other options. Whenever you hover that little red dot, it'll tell you you can either delete the shape, whether you want to include or exclude the shape. Okay, so if I hover this and I exclude that rectangle, now it's saying that listings cannot exist in this section, where for the blue ones, it means that it's including them. Okay, I can always toggle that back by clicking include this shape. Okay, if I want to start deleting the shapes, I can always just do that individually, or there is kind of a clear all shapes. If I clear this though, since we have one out in the water, it'll kind of get all the pins back on the map. I'd have to kind of redraw this rectangle just to get rid of all my pins, for example. Okay. Next up, we have a very, very important option here called layers. This one you'll find me using pretty often. Whenever I'm breaking down an area that I want to find listings in, the first thing that I do is I turn on my layers icon for neighborhoods. Okay, it's also how I find the specific neighborhood when I'm inputting a listing. If you click on layers and you activate these boundaries that you have, things like region, municipality, or neighborhood, it will actually give you the overlay for that area. Okay, it's currently created and set out and mapped for all of the previous ORDIS boards. So they're trying to work these in, and they will shortly. When they talk about geographies, they're talking about giving us the neighborhoods and regional maps for all those other participating boards. But the previous ORDIS ones, you can absolutely see all the neighborhoods that are set out. Okay, so if I go to St. Catharines or Niagara, right, I can see, just like I could see all the Hamilton ones or the Oakville ones, for example. What exactly constitutes Old Oakville? Well, maybe I don't know off by heart that it looks like it goes from Chartwell over to this little creek, but you can see that really, really specifically when you toggle your neighborhoods layer. Okay, if I turn this on, right, it might end up being the backdrop for my actual drawing. Maybe the section that my client wanted was starting at Morrison, right? I could see that it includes the Morrison neighborhood. Might draw out into the water, knowing that that's not going to matter, right? There's not going to be any listings that pop in the water. And right, maybe they said something like 4th line. Well, if I make my way through, and now I'm following, maybe I'm just doing a really quick kind of version of this, but if this ends up being what the client's looking for, when I make this drawing, I can see all the listings. They will only show up within the actual drawing, for example. Okay, so that might be like one strategy that we might use. And now that we have 76 listings, we might go to our criteria screen and start breaking down things like price. Well, in our area that we chose, it's going to be a pretty high price, but right, you get the idea. You'd go to criteria, you'd start breaking down further and further into what your client's looking for, but you might have started out with this base. I'll delete this shape, okay? But it came and it stemmed from the layers icon where we turned on the neighborhood boundary, okay? As I turn that on or off, right? If you're too zoomed out on the map, just so that you know, if I try to do this when I'm zoomed out, it'll be red and it'll say zoom in, okay? But if I start to zoom in, it'll eventually give me the part where I'm able to activate it. And then you can kind of go in and choose your exact neighborhoods. So just understanding, right, these neighborhoods and these regional breakdowns, they are set out by the boards and associations. Okay, it might not match up exactly with what Google Map has. It's probably not going to line up with the, I don't know, postal code maps for Canada Post, right? But these are how they're laid out with regards to how the listings are going to be set out when you put them on the MLS system. So do bear in mind, right? If you ever need a little bit of a guide for your neighborhoods, the layers icon is like the perfect place for that. You just turn it on and it gives you the answers visually here. Okay. So it kind of takes all our drawing tools. The last one here is recenter. So wherever I would have set my like main kind of location, I can always recenter on it, or if I drew something, I can kind of recenter. It'll bring us to the drawing. And the very last one left really is that INRIX drive time that I talked about. So let's say a couple of words about INRIX as we conclude these different icons. So INRIX drive time, as I mentioned, it is an interactive drawing that it will put on your map, which brings in driving patterns and Google Analytics. Okay, so actually can, if you're getting pretty creative with this, could be a really, really good way to involve your client in the whole process, right? Maybe they're not super sure exactly where it is that they're looking for a property right now. And if they're looking for a way to track that down, INRIX can be one of the really good ways to maybe suggest an example. If you click on INRIX, it'll give you some things to enter. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in my commute to work. So if you're picturing this section, right, you might be asking your client, hey, well, you know what, what's your commute to work like? Or what would you like your commute to be as like the longest commute, right? If you don't want it to be more than 15 minutes, well, we're probably going to look for properties really close to your work. Well, how do we gauge that 15 minutes? INRIX drive time is a really, really good way to do that. Okay, if I was to type in our main 125 Navy Street location in Oakville, what am I doing with the letter P? There we go, Oakville. Okay, I'll just hit enter so that it kind of corrects and loads in. So I've got 125 Navy Street. I want to drive to here. Well, the board office opens at 8:30 a.m. Let's try to get there for 8:15. And we'll say that, yeah, you know what? The longest commute that I'm looking for is 15 minutes on a typical day of the week, like a Monday. If I click add, let that load, it'll draw on the map basically what would happen in reverse, right? If I was over here and this is where I actually lived and I typed into Google Maps, right? If I lived like over here and I typed into Google Maps, all right, how do I get to 125 Navy Street? Well, it would probably estimate somewhere around the ballpark of like 13 to 15 minutes, and it would put me here by 8:15 in the morning. Well, that's what INRIX drive time does, okay? And it does update with driving patterns and stuff like that. So bear that in mind. And what that might mean is, well, depending on the time of day, the shape might look different, depending on the current environment and how many cars are on the road type of thing. Like INRIX in general has changed quite drastically ever since lockdown and things like that. Like this drawing might not actually be this large. I don't know, let's just say a couple of years from now, when all this gets more sorted and under control type of thing, right? This drawing might be a lot smaller. Maybe you can't actually get all the way from this corner of kind of the 403 in 15 minutes. Maybe maybe the drawing only comes out to this section here a couple of years from now when there's more cars on the road at that time, for example. If I was to do another, let's see. So this one is going from this corner of the 407, 403. Let's remember that. It's on Clarkson, and the tip of this section is by Appleby. Okay, hopefully we can remember that. If I go back to this red circle, I can change the drive time info, for example. Maybe what we'll do is keeping it at 15 minutes. What I might do is just to show you the driving pattern part of it. What if I go to like 3 a.m.? There's got to be less cars on the road at 3 a.m. I would expect my drawing to maybe grow. I don't know how much. It's only over a factor of 15 minutes, but let's just see if it gets a little bit larger. Alrighty, so our shape did definitely change. It did get a little bit larger. It doesn't look like this section here grew. However, it grew in this, oops, I grabbed that by accident. It grew in this portion here. Like it used to be kind of thinner, and this whole area opened up since it's now 3 in the morning, and we can expect to maybe get there apparently this whole section can get there in 15 minutes when it's 3 in the morning instead of 8 in the morning. Okay, so you can kind of see how the drive time info brings in those driving patterns, right? If I was to drastically change it as well, right? What if I went drive time info and made it 45 minutes? Well, it's going to be a massive drawing, right? You'll be able to get a lot further at 3 in the morning in 45 minutes. Looks like apparently you can even get from Toronto, which looks a lot different. I'm commuting from this area over here in Hamilton, and it was taking me about 50 minutes to get to work for 8:15. So if I change that, we'll see what it looks like. Change drive time info, put it back to 8:15, update. It's probably even going to be bigger because of lockdown and everything. Yeah, so I'm more over here, but there's even, apparently you can get all the way from outside of Grimsby and still make it in 45 minutes. Understandably, there's fewer cars on the road. Okay, but this drawing, what I'm getting to is you might create a couple of them, right? If you remember, our other one was more or less, let's say, around this shape here. Oops, just move the map a bit. Say that it was something like this. Our first INRIX drive time was kind of around that section. Well, what you might do is, for example, perhaps the kind of the current potential buyer that you're talking to and dealing with right now, well, maybe they're a couple, maybe let's just say it's like a husband and wife or something like that. And if you run 2 INRIX drive times next to each other, wherever those 2 overlap, right? Maybe someone is commuting into Milton and the other one is commuting closer to Mississauga. Well, I mean, understandably, we're just going to assume it's kind of in between those locations. That's going to be ideal, but INRIX might give you kind of a better idea and kind of bring in more specifically the properties that you'd be looking at. Okay, so wherever those drawings overlap, perhaps. So we might consider just the area that we're looking at is more this triangle, where those 2 different drawings have overlapped, which take into account the commutes of the 2 different individuals, for example. Right, so you can kind of INRIX, you can run a couple different INRIX drive times and work those in. I'm just going to delete these shapes though. And that kind of brings in all the different tools that you have on this drawing screen. Okay. Let's set up maybe a little bit of an example, like a case study for a particular client. Okay. Find some listings and then have an idea, right? How are we going to find some listings? One of the topics that we, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about in a second is customizing the listing displays and what has shown up on that results screen. So we'll put together a quick example, and then we can look at that a little bit further as well. Okay. You know what? I'm going to answer this question really, really quickly, though, just since we can kind of tackle this one right before we get into our example. But I did have the question, how do you search for properties that were sold, for example, within the last 2 months? Okay. Well, how you do that is you just make a quick change to your status. So when you're on that criteria screen, remember, right, we have like hundreds of things that we can tweak and make changes to. We haven't gotten that far yet where we've actually changed the status, but it does show up. It's like that first thing in the top left. If I want to look at the things that sold in the last 2 months, I'm going to have to click on closed. Closed status is the one that has sold, right? Pending would be if it's firmed up, but just hasn't reached its close date just yet. So whether you want pending or not is up to you. But if I go with just closed, you'll notice here it gives you a calendar. So I can either click on the calendar and specify the 2 months that I want, or I can do it right here where it gives me the default. 0 to 180 is the system just generalizing and saying, okay, for now, let's look at the last 6 months. Everything that closed in the last 180 days, give or take, is kind of like the length of half of the year, right? Half of, like, instead of being a full year, which would be 365, it's just the system always gives you the 180. If I wanted to do just 2 months, I might type in something like 0 to 60. This would give me everything that closed in the last 2 months. Oops. And then as you put in your question, how do I do it in a certain neighborhood? Well, maybe you would just geographically do it here in the drop down, or you'd go to your map and you draw out the neighborhood. But then you would only leave this to closed ones, so you can create a CMA or whatever the case may be. Okay. So just how you manipulate the status and stuff like that, but the way that you break down the neighborhood, maybe it is specifically by kind of turning on your neighborhood tab and choosing Old Oakville, perhaps. And then you can see the things that actually closed in Old Oakville in the last 2 months. Well, there's only 5 of them, but if I was to kind of quickly draw and include these 5, there we go. I've done the things that closed in the last 2 months in one particular neighborhood, for example. Okay. So we'll end up talking about that more, and you'll see this next piece will incorporate, especially with the customizing listing displays, there's some things we want to work in and talk about. So what if we were approaching something a bit different, right? You saw kind of a quick curveball one about closed properties, but what if we were dealing with a particular client right now that asks us, hey, can you find me some properties that are currently active status, some available listings that we can look through? I'm interested in purchasing a property. The area that I really like in Oakville is kind of maybe a tiny bit of Glen Abbey if possible, things like Westmount, West Oak Trails, if you want to focus more on that area. I'm not 100% sure of my price range right now, but if we're able to work in something like 1.2 million, something like that, maybe 1.2 to 1.4, let's choose that. Okay, and we're going to go with just houses to get rid of the condos. So if my client kind of gave me some of this stuff to break down what we're looking for, how will we approach that? Okay, start by hopping into a residential search. Well, they said that they're looking for active properties. So right now, right, I can either leave it the way it is, or I can maybe uncheck conditional. Maybe we won't worry about conditional ones. We were looking, they did mention, hey, it's going to be more active listings. What would be the next thing, right? Do we specify house just yet? Do we start to break down our region and try to get to the neighborhoods that they told us about? We know it's going to be things like Glen Abbey, Westmount, and West Oak Trails. Or do we perhaps like going to the map and maybe we'll draw it there first and do the criteria second. Okay, however you approach it is going to be up to you, right? You might have a preference for the direction that you take, but one thing is certain, okay? There's one of the inquiries I get so often on the phone, and it's just so unfortunate, is when a member calls me up and says, Eric, help, I'm trying to find a property for my client. Every time I do it, I'm up to 0 results so quickly, I can never find anything. Help me understand Matrix. Okay, well, and then we go in, we talk about it a little bit further. I'm like, hey, can you just maybe walk me through how you started this search and some selections that you made? And within like a minute, they've told me that they've clicked off like 16 different things all the way down the screen. And understandably, right, they're at 0 matches. Okay, so just don't fall into that one. As long as you're not clicking every single option mindlessly, you will be able to find your options, but just bear that in mind, okay? I would stay away from clicking too many things at once. You always want to keep an eye on the number of matches that you have as you refine it into what you're looking for. Just be careful how many selections you make though. Okay, I'm just going to refresh this screen rather than try to uncheck all the ones that I just did there. So what I mean by that is in my strategy, right, rather than even breaking down the neighborhood here and try to do it out of this list, which might be a little bit tough, I am actually going to jump to the map right away. Our client gave us a whole bunch of things in this case study to find the property they're looking for. I just choose to go to the map first and set that out more visually. So they said Westmount, West Oak Trails, and Glen Abbey. So I'm going to zoom into the area that I think that's kind of roughly around. Okay, I could see West Oak Trails on the Google Map portion here. I could see a bit of Glen Abbey. So maybe I'll start from here. When I click on my layers icon, I'm definitely making use of my neighborhood tab for this. So maybe I'll just make that selection. Whether I zoom in or out is to be determined. Right now I can see some edges of some of these neighborhoods. So maybe I'll stay zoomed to kind of this size here, and I might draw something like the polygon, right? Try to grab this. Mine's going to be a really rough drawing. It's not going to be exact, but let's try something like this. I'll follow along these lines as best I can. With this zoom option, I can drag the screen a bit. Maybe I'll go all the way to here. You know what? They didn't say to bring in Bronte Creek, but I might just go a little bit over since Westmount's right here. There might be some other ones in Bronte Creek, so why not? And then I'll follow this line, close it off. Okay, so now that I have this set out, rather than 5,000 plus matches, I can tell that in this area, I'm already down to 75 matches. When I click layers and I uncheck neighborhood, it starts to be a lot more obvious, like what exactly I just did with regards to the shape, the drawing, all that type of stuff. And all the listings are kind of enclosed in that area. So this also simplifies it quite a bit, right? It's going to be a lot tougher in my criteria screen to select the exact neighborhoods in this list, where we did a number of different neighborhoods pretty quickly here just by going to the map and using this option. Okay, so we see all 75. Something that I typically like to do on this screen as well is just while we're here, before we break down the criteria, maybe we do want to get a little bit of an idea of what we're working with, right? We can hover these. We can see that some of the pins, maybe they're like $500,000 condominiums in some cases. There might be some properties up above the $2 million mark, right? We're seeing like, I think there was one here that was like 2.1 million. I can't seem to find it again, but right, 5 bedroom, 5 bathroom, that's 2 million, things like that in Glen Abbey. Okay, we got one here, 2.2 million. It's probably not going to be in our price range kind of thing, but getting an idea of what's going to happen when we change our criteria. So if we click on criteria, that is what we're going to do now. We keep it to active status. We're working with the 75 that we had. If I click on house, for example, well, I'm probably going to cut like half of those out, right? I might be down to like 30 or 40 as soon as I make this selection. So typically I'll do all my criteria second for that reason, keeping an eye on the number of matches. All I did was house, active. I'm already down to 43. I don't have to specify anything with regards to the region, the neighborhood, or the city, because the listings can only be in my actual drawing on the map, so we can ignore location. The next thing our client might have set out, though, is probably things to do with price. So do we get away with 1.2 to 1.4 million? Let's see what we can come up with here. Even if I was to do it right on the dot, how many listings do we end up with? Apparently 6 matches. So you know what, maybe I will just kind of keep this number. No, if my client told me 1.2 million, right, I probably would even do like 1150 or something like that to 1450 or whatever the case may be. But just in the sake of our example, we'll just go with that. Direct number of 1.2 to 1.4 because it gave us 6 matches, which is fine to work with. If we hop back to the map, we'll look at our 6 matches. It does not look like we were graced with any in more of the Glen Abbey or this West Oak Trails area. It's more like Westmount and a little bit of, what was that, Bronte, I think, to the left. Okay, but we've got 6 matches here. And of course, these would be the ones that we would look into further and look into the results and track down if it was what we were in fact looking for. Okay. Now, notice what actually happened there, though, which is really important. We barely made any selections. So just going back on that thing that I mentioned earlier, right? Be careful how many things you select at once before you start comparing how many options you have left. I have active, property type house. All we did was specify price. We have our neighborhood drawing here. Just like that, we're down to 6 matches. Okay, so that's what I mean by be a little bit careful, right? If you're making selections on the criteria screen, have a look first on how it's actually affecting the numbers that you have, or you will hit 0 matches very, very quickly. Okay, but now we can see we have 6 particular properties that we might want to look into, take some next steps, right? Now we're going to decide, hey, is this the right number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms that our client's looking for, a whole bunch of other stuff. Okay, what I'm going to do first here, though, as I talked about earlier, right, we said you can manipulate this whole screen, which means my results screen is going to look different than yours. That's a fact, right? So let's start by talking about this listing display. We'll get back to talking about these 6 properties for our client in a second, but that part's really, really important. I want to make sure everyone is comfortable making changes to their listing displays. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to reset it to the default view. If I click on this gear icon, that's what's going to give me that option. All right, I've got common interest here all the way to the left. When I click on the gear icon and then I reset to the system search defaults, that's when you'll see the screen that maybe you're a little bit more familiar with. So I'll reset it here. Your search defaults have been cleared. Well, here's the more default view that you might be used to. Things like MLS number followed by status, set by increasing price order, common interest, address, city, that kind of thing. So this is the default. If you've never changed your listing display, this is the way it comes through. Okay, but as I said, to make things more efficient and to save you some time, you are absolutely going to make changes to this display. Okay. How are some of the ways that we do that? Well, when you move something, moving a particular column to a different spot, just notice that to get your 4-pointed arrow, which is like your move icon, it's when you hover the gray portion behind the title. It's very, very hard for me to show you just on screen here, but if I go from here with my mouse, it's a pointer. If I scroll kind of down and I go right into this gray section, notice how it's a 4-pointed arrow. Well, that lets me actually move this section. So I could take this column, I could drag and drop it to a different location. That's like kind of the first function there. Okay. When I'm in this space, if instead of moving it by dragging and dropping, I just click and I let go, it'll give me a menu that pops up. Right? If I click on any of these in the background, it gives me a bit of a menu. This is where I get to see the function of removing the column or inserting a new column. And that's exactly how you get all your customized ones, right? If I insert a column, right? We had a question in the chat earlier with regards to what in the world is current price? Is it my sold price? Is it my list price? Well, if I want to get a more specific price description, maybe I click on insert column, and you'll notice all of your different features, which might be hundreds of them, are here in this list. Well, I might type something like price. Now I can see all the ones that have price as the keyword. Okay, we have list price, we have sold price perhaps, right? So a whole bunch of different types of things that do with prices. Maybe I'll just bring in sold price because that's an option I have here on screen, and it's right here. So remember, right for this example, we're just dealing with active statuses. None of them are going to have a sold price, but maybe later on when I'm doing the ones that actually sold in the last 2 months, might be really, really good to have this here so I don't have to individually go into every single one to find the price that it's sold at. I could just do that right here and it could show me it for all of them at once. Okay, so things like sold price. Things like, well, it says address and city. Maybe there's one called neighborhood. If I insert column, NEI, even just starting the beginning of the word, I could bring that one in. We can get an idea of the neighborhood that these were in fact in. Okay, we did expect that a couple of them would be in Bronte Creek because we kind of went a little bit bigger on our drawing towards the left or to the, the southeast portion. We've got one that came in Westmount, it looks like, but maybe this we weren't prepared for. There are in fact some TREB neighborhoods that came into play as well. We have the TREB version of West Oak Trails, and there's 3 properties that came in. Okay, so maybe this goes a little bit further into that question that we had that followed up, right? How can we see, or can we actually see listings from TREB when we're running these kinds of searches? So maybe I'll take a quick second and talk about that. Like, why did we get TREB ones here? Well, there is a private data agreement where there's shared information with TREB right now. The thing to understand with it is that it is geographic, okay, which means that it only happens in the areas of OMDREB. So our area is Oakville, Milton, and Halton Hills. If a TREB agent lists a property in Oakville, Milton, or Halton Hills, Oakville board members are able to see those listings. Okay, they're able to see those listings in this shared version where you see, right? It doesn't start with a 400 number, it starts with a TW number. That would be a listing that came through that private shared data agreement. Okay, you're only going to see those if you are an OMDREB board member. And this is because, right, geographically, we're talking about Oakville, Milton, and Halton Hills. Because these ones are in Oakville, we're seeing some share through from Toronto. So this listing here would have most likely been uploaded by a TREB agent that put it up on Stratus. Because it's in Oakville, however, Oakville members are able to access this data that came through, okay? So it is a two-way street. If an Oakville board member, if a member of OMDREB lists a property in Oakville, Milton, or Halton Hills, same thing will happen. TREB agent will be able to see it, whether they're searching on their version of Stratus or whatever MLS system they're using there, they're able to see that listing because of that private geographical agreement. So hopefully that makes sense, right? If I'm in Mississauga and I'm looking for property from a TREB agent, I'm not going to see it. That's not in Oakville, Milton, or Halton Hills. Same thing with Kitchener, right? We're sharing information with Kitchener. There isn't a shared agreement between Kitchener and TREB, however. It's just Oakville, Milton, Halton Hills, and TREB. So hopefully that makes sense. Something kind of distinct to maybe just bear in mind here as well. This is just an identifier for our system. This letter T helps us understand that this listing was from Toronto. The true MLS number is right here though, W5122669. If I have a dual membership and I'm searching for this property on the TREB system, right, I would just omit that letter T identifier. If I typed in starting with the W followed by the rest of the MLS number, that would be the actual listing if I'm searching on Stratus or whatever the case may be. Okay, so this identifier is just to help us understand. It just came through that shared feed from that private agreement. Okay, but we did end up with a range of different properties here, right? We have 3 that were put up on the ITSO real estate system and 3 that were shared in from Stratus. I mean, I chose an area in Oakville and we did end up with some in our price range type of thing. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Does also mean, right, now that we've broken down a little bit of the neighborhood column and we could see all these different types of neighborhoods, well, right, when our client was telling us the neighborhoods that they're interested in, well, how would I have known to include ITSO West Oak Trails, for example? What I mean by that is we drew it. It took care of that for us because we drew the particular area. What if we weren't drawing it though? What if we were actually choosing it out of this list? Well, it's a little bit tougher to do. I'm not very familiar with making use of this one. If you like using your neighborhood search in this way, please absolutely do that. I find it a little bit tougher to use, so that's why you see me using the map for that and drawing the feature. But if you are using this, it is a lot easier to use, at least with this little window option. So if you click on this, right, it gives you a pop-up screen. You can make it a little bit bigger, and then you can work with it, right? If I was to maybe try things like, well, there was kind of Westmount in there, right? Maybe I was looking in Westmount, West Oak Trails. What were some other ones? Glen Abbey, right? Glen Abbey. What was it? Bronte, I think. I can't remember if it was Bronte or Bronte Creek that we had, but either way, right? We kind of work through, add the ones that we want. But the thing to bear in mind is we might also have to work with some of these ITSORealEstate ones since we're in the Oakville area, and we might want to account for that shared information. Okay, so we noticed that ours was definitely ITSORealEstate West Oak Trails. So like, notice how this part is already, it's starting to be a little bit more intricate. I don't know, maybe off by heart, maybe if sometimes I'm working in the Kitchener area and I'm trying to work with the Kitchener neighborhoods, well, what if I'm not very familiar with those, right? So doing this value from this list and working in the exact ones, it's gonna be a little bit tougher than just going to your map, drawing a shape. Your shape is going to account for the neighborhoods on its own. It's usually why I just lean towards that option. Okay, so you kind of get an idea, a glimpse into why I choose that strategy more so than others, but you can absolutely select your exact neighborhoods on your criteria screen if you are comfortable doing that. Just notice that the options are there. Okay, I'm going to go back to results though. We were, as we talked a little bit about that ITSORealEstate share feed, we're still working in the concept of customizing our listing display. Okay, so aside from like inserting and removing different columns, right, there might be some things tucked away that I want to bring more right front and center, right? Things like days on market. Maybe that's a value that I keep an eye on pretty often. We know it's active status, but hey, how long has this property been on the market? We have one of them for 38 days, right? Some might be just in the last week or so. So maybe I'll bring this one over. It's all the way hidden towards the right by default. Yeah, I want it more towards the left here. When you customize your listing displays, the most important thing that you're going to have to do, however, is setting that as the new default so that it's actually like that the next time you come in here. If I don't set this as the default and I just go back to my main screen and then I run another residential search, chances are it's just going to revert back to the default. It'll just erase all these things that I've done by moving them over to the side or adding in the columns and things like that. So how you set your listing display so that it actually accepts it as the new standard is by going back to that gear icon that we used. If I click on this gear icon, it's the first option. When you saw me resetting to the default for the system, it was this bottom one. It's this top one though, if you're saving your own custom. It's kind of a mouthful, but let me just read it out here. It says, set current display, sort order, end count per page as my search starting default. When you click on this option, it puts a little pop-up in the top left. Your search defaults have been set. Okay, this means that if I leave from this screen and I go somewhere totally different and I just run a new residential search and I go to results, it's going to keep this as my new default. I've got days on market over here, we got sold price, and we have neighborhood. Those are some of the things that we did to incorporate our new customized listing display. Okay, if I ever want to go back to the system defaults, I have the option where we can make some changes, and we would set the changes as the new default. Okay, anytime I run a residential search now, it's going to hold that, it'll keep that information. But setting that as the standard with this top option is very, very important, or else it will just revert back to normal. When you kind of, maybe you log out and you log back in, you need to set it, or else it won't remember. Okay. Maybe a really, really good time to show you one really quick function as well. I navigated away, I ended up maybe losing the 6 search results that I had. Just notice that you do have a little section called recent searches. Maybe I do want that back. I don't want to go and redraw that exact section again, take the steps and choose the criteria and get back to those 6 listings. Well, if I click on recent searches, there might be a way for me to get it back. And here it is, it's right here. Right? If you remember, I don't know, maybe earlier on, some other ones that we might have done, kind of, you see the ones that are a part of the current session that you're working on. Okay. If I was to click on this one with 6 listings, when I hover over it, it kind of gives me a bit of a section where I can see some more details, the time that it was run at, and when I click on that, I'll get this one right back. We ran the search at 228. When we go to map, it even holds the shape that we drew. Okay, so recent searches, not to be overlooked. It's like it's right there in the top right. Okay, I've got this section, and now that we've talked about more of how this screen looks and everything, right, we might be starting to work into, hey, well, what if I want to save this search? Maybe next time I log in, right, I don't want to rely on it being actually in my recent searches. How do I save it so that later on in the week I can search it again, see if anything changed, or 2 weeks from now, maybe there's some more properties in this section? Well, when you're saving a search, what you're in fact doing is you're saving this information in your summary towards the bottom. Okay, we're saving the fact that it's going to be a residential property, that the status is active, subtype is house, this latitude, longitude, description is the drawing that we made, and then we have our price range. So pretty much these 5 key components to break down into 6 listings. When we're saving the search, that is in fact what we're saving. Okay. You'll notice the function is here towards the bottom of those kind of rows and columns. If I click save and then new saved search, that's where we can start to kind of break this down. So who is this going to be for? Well, we didn't come up with a fake name for our client, but maybe I'll go with, I don't know, I'm just going to go with Joe, properties for Joe. There we go. Properties for Joe, and I don't know, maybe if you wanted to do even more, a description that's going to help you with regards to the neighborhoods you chose or price or whatever the case may be, right? You might do that. You might include the actual contact name if that's the case. But just notice how like the 5 key components that I described a second ago below the table that we had, it really is what you're saving. It's your criteria breakdown. If we save this, okay, you'll see created saved search properties for Joe, and maybe next week when we want to run it again, that's when we'll determine kind of some differences or things that changed over that 7-day period or however long it ends up being. Okay. Whenever you want to access searches that you've saved, well, now you've saved something to your account. You've in fact saved it into your My Matrix section. So how we were hovering search before and just jumping into all the different screens there, well, your My Matrix is going to hold a whole bunch of the options that have to do with your account, things like your My Listings section. You also have your saved searches here. Mine is probably going to be totally out of order and like a whole bunch of stuff going on in here. But if we go into saved searches, before long, we'll find properties for Joe. We'll see it has a timestamp here, the 30th of March, so we know which one we're working with either way. Okay, and if we click this little drop down, it'll give us more of an indication. We can see the exact criteria. We can go in and actually see the results. We can change the actual criteria in the end, right? All this different type of stuff that we can do to manipulate it. Okay, but if I want to run this search next week, I just click on results. It'll show me what has happened. Okay, so again, just remember towards the bottom here, some of the functions that you have. Okay, with that, as far as especially today's session, and for the sake of time and to give some time for question and answer and stuff like that, I would like to just bring in kind of our last concept here. So I did want to kind of conclude, right, searching function and the way that we approach the searches. It's kind of really important to bear in mind that you may end up coming up with a whole bunch of different strategies. If there's something really specific that my client's looking for, I might approach searches from a couple different angles, right? Maybe I am going into the residential search and starting out with a keyword search in the public remarks the way we saw it using the wildcard feature. Right? Starting from here, getting 441 matches, and then going to house and breaking down my neighborhood or creating a drawing on the map. Okay, perhaps, right, that's just one approach. After I'm done with that and I've got the ones that I'm looking for, share those with my client, perhaps I save them, and then I hop in and I do a whole different approach where I use the map and break down the criteria and find a different way to track down the listings. Right, whole bunch of different ways that you can approach searches. Searches on your search widget when you know the details of the property or you know the MLS number that you're looking to work to. Okay, so whole bunch of different spots we looked at. Remembering that all these different screens in regards to the search, they're very, very similar. Okay, if you're looking to incorporate more than one at a time, that's called a cross-property search. And we'll talk about that one next here as we go to customize some hot sheets. If I click on cross-property, okay, you'll notice the screen itself, rather than being called residential, is called cross-property. And what happens as a result is it gives me one new section that wasn't there before called property type. This is the one that lets me run more than one property type at a time. Right? This wouldn't be here if I chose search residential. There wouldn't be this drop down because we would just be, it'd be assumed we're in the residential search. But if I want to run, you know, farm and land at the same time, you can do that on a cross property search. If I want to do residential lease and commercial lease for some reason at the same time, right? You can get a little bit more creative with that from the cross property screen. Okay, what I want to show you with regards to hot sheets is just to give you another search function that you have. Hot sheets is a really, really good way that you can manipulate it and use it for any type of approach that you want. I find that it's very, very useful in the sense of keeping an eye on the market, right? Maybe in your area that you're trading in and searching for properties in really often and the types of properties you're looking at day to day, well, you might create a hot sheet to represent that. And I'll show you what I mean, okay? What happens with a hot sheet is you get to customize it however you'd like. You can get extremely specific, and it's a time-based search. So if I was to choose something like the last 24 hours, you see that mine, I've set out new residential and multi-residential in Oakville. If I click on that in the last 24 hours, it'll actually timestamp it. And now I'm looking at only the things that happen in 24 hours. So going back from 2:51 p.m. today when I ran the search all the way to 2:51 p.m. yesterday, March 29th. So all of these, right, I can keep an eye on the 24 properties that changed to this active status in the last 24 hours. So a really, really good way to gauge the market. The thing is, however, a hot sheet is only going to work if you customize it. So let's look at how you would approach a hot sheet. Mine are not going to look like yours. Yours are going to look totally different because these are customized. Okay, so let me click on customize here. Now you're in a manage hot sheet screen. Have a whole bunch of features towards this right-hand side, and there's also a restore system defaults. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that now so that mine looks a little bit more like yours. So I'll restore the system defaults, and here we are with the lovely placeholders, cross-property, residential, residential lease, all the way to business only. However, these aren't actually doing anything right now. They really aren't doing anything unless you customize them, right? If I do 24 hours residential, I've got like almost 1,800 listings, and understandably, some are in Kitchener, some are in Napanee, because we understand that from the start of the session, right? There's 21 boards and associations, so an open residential search for the last 24 hours is probably not that useful to me. I don't think I need things in Napanee, at least just for right now. Maybe I will have a client that wants me to find something in Napanee at some point, but for right now, it's probably not that important. Okay, so you're going to customize these and you're going to make them your own. You notice that mine only had 2 values at the start, and I just kind of deleted those, and that's actually because usually when I approach a hot sheet, because these are only default placeholders for the system, I find it a lot better to just get rid of them completely, right? Rather than having to edit the criteria, renaming the field, I just, you know what, I don't even want to deal with them. I just get rid of them completely. If you ever want them back, restore system defaults. It's right there for you. Okay, but I like to start with a clean slate here. The only thing left on my manage hot sheet screen is add. Okay, so we might create something really quick that represents a trading area, right? What if it is residential leases that you're looking for in, maybe you're just looking for residential leases in Milton in a specific price range, whatever the case may be, right? You're probably going to create a whole bunch of different ones that are just one click away from giving you your trading area. Well, you saw mine earlier. I'll just recreate the ones that we had actually. Well, I had residential and multi-residential. So how do I get 2 different status types or property types in the same search? Well, it is by incorporating a cross property, and I just renamed it. So instead of going, I just went specifically new in this case. Okay, maybe new residential. The reason perhaps I want multi-residential, maybe some of my clients want me to keep an eye out for duplexes, fourplexes, other investment properties and things like that. So maybe I'll work these in, right? That's going to be up to you whether you do that for yourself or not in your search. And then I'll probably just specify an area. So like 3 specific things. What's the timeline? Well, it's kind of new ones. What are the property types and what is the location we're working in? Maybe that's descriptive enough for our specific example. Save that as a cross property and understand that after I save this, it's not doing anything right now. It's just an open search of the system until you edit the criteria. Right now, it's just a placeholder for cross property. I have to actually edit this criteria and choose those options, or else it's totally open market right now. Okay, we can see it's a cross property search, which will allow us to select property type. We said residential and multi-residential. We said new. And maybe in this case, rather than like trying to run a map search and get into drawings or anything like that, maybe I'll just type in Milton to keep it really, really simplified, right? We're not breaking down neighborhood or anything. We'll just select under city, jump right to Milton. Perhaps we can even just hit save like that. Hit done. See that our main hot sheet screen, we have whatever it is, maybe 24 hours or the last 3 days. As soon as we click on this title now, it is actually going to run that search. If I click on that, I'll see all the properties in Milton that are residential and multi-residential and have this active status within the last 3 days, all the way to March 27th, for example. Okay, so we'll be able to work through there, keep an eye on the trading area, get a look at the types of listings that come through. A lot of things can be derived from that, and it was really quickly by just toggling this, right? What's the difference between the last 3 days and the last 24 hours? You just really quickly notice that it was more than half of them actually happened in the last 24 hours. Maybe there was a fewer amount of listings that actually popped up on specifically on Sunday. More of them showed up kind of into yesterday and into the start of the week kind of thing. Okay, but you'd be able to gauge that really, really quickly. If I was to go in and add in another really quick one, add cross property, new resi, multi-resi. If I can type, wow, multi-resi in Oakville. Now I've got a different location, same type of search, different location. Just gonna edit the criteria. You can see how quickly this can become just when we have an idea of the direction we're going. Choose Oakville, hit save, press done. And now we've got a couple of them, right? I might add in a whole bunch more as time goes on. I might do leases in Oakville, leases in Milton, condominiums in Halton, and do like a whole area for the condominiums, whatever the case might be, right? And you can really, really quickly gauge the market. So what'll happen now is, well, if I run the search right now at 3 p.m. and I have a look at this one for Oakville, there's 25. Well, I understand that that was up to give or take 3 p.m. since yesterday. Tomorrow, maybe part of like my routine is around 3 p.m. I like to keep an eye on the market, right? I might just run this search really, really quickly tomorrow at 3, and it would give me totally new results. I can gauge the market, I can keep an eye on it. And that might be a really quick strategy that I can use to keep an eye on that. So it's not so much like a saved search. You can make this search as specific as you want. If you want a really, really specific hot sheet, you saw mine was a little bit more broad. We included a whole area, something like a whole entire city, but we did specify new listings in our case. And you do toggle this kind of time stamp and this time range for it.